Hi kindergarten friends. Today we're going to read the book called Luba and the Wren by Patricia Polacco. One of my favorite stories that has a bird in it. Luba and the Wren. Once there was a poor farmer and his wife. They lived with their only child, Luba, in a humble house in a clearing on the edge of the forest. Their house was crowded and small. The roof leaked, the fences needed mending. The fields, although lovingly tended, were meager and bare. They had little comfort, but their daughter Luba was full of joy and free from all care, as children should be. One day, as Luba was looking for mushrooms deep in the forest, she heard a small, pitiful cry coming from the tree above her. There she saw the most beautiful, delicate little wren caught in a net. She took pity on the little creature and climbed the tree to free it. It took wing and sang a glorious song. Then it fluttered down from the sky and landed on a branch next to her. To Luba's astonishment, it spoke. "My dear, how can I ever repay you for saving my life?" it asked. When Luba found her voice, she replied, "But I would have done that for anyone." "For your kindness," the bird said, "I will grant you any wish that you will ask of me, for I am enchanted." "But I am content. I have no wish," Luba said as she shyly laughed. "Well, if you ever want anything, come to the forest and call me," the bird said. Luba ran all the way home and burst into the house and told her mother and father about the enchanted wren. "Foolish girl," her mother groaned. "Why didn't you ask the wren for a bigger house? You know how hard life is for us. We are so poor," said her father. You see the dad over there? "Couldn't you go back and ask?" her mother said wearily. "Go back to the forest and ask the wren for a bigger house on fertile land." Luba did as they asked and went to the edge of the forest. Little Wren," she called out. "Dear one," the wren chirped as she landed on a tree branch, "what is it that you wish?" "It's not mine," Luba said shyly. "It's my parents' wish. That brings me back to you." What do they want?" "A bigger house. They would like to have more room and also to have land that is rich and fertile so that they don't have to work so hard to grow things." "Go then, dear one. It's already done," said the wren. Sure enough, as Luba got to the clearing where her small house had been, there stood a grand farmhouse. Her parents greeted her. Their clothes were new and not patched. Their land was lush and fertile. The orchards were full of trees heavy with ripe fruit. Luba's heart sang. She knew that her parents would be happy and content. But alas, within weeks, they were pacing the floor. "We have been thinking," they said as they paced, "we would like a bigger house with more fields and workers to help us farm. But I already asked the wren for this wonderful farm. How can I ask him for more?" "You saved her life," the father said. "She owes you this. Now go ask the wren for a manor house with acres and acres of land," her mother ordered. Luba went to the edge of the forest. She was reluctant to call the little wren, but the wren came as soon as she heard Luba's voice. "Dear one," she said, "what is it now?" "It's not for me. I wouldn't ask again, but it's for my parents. They no longer like the farmhouse. Now they want an estate with acres and acres of land and servants." The wren could see that the child was ashamed. "Go then, my dear," the wren said, "for it is already done." And when Luba returned home, there, instead of a big farmhouse, stood a graceful house of estate, surrounded by lush gardens, ponds, and honking geese and swans. As she entered the house, her father was seated by the fireplace in a grand chair. He was truly lord of the manor. Her mother was seated next to him, being tended by handmaidens. Spread before them was a great table glowing with all kinds of wondrous things to eat. Now Luba was sure that they would be happy and content. But just as before, Luba awoke one morning to see her parents pacing the floor. "We've been thinking," they began. "Since the Wren can grant us anything we want, why didn't we ask for a palace in the first place?" "But Mama, Papa," Luba pleaded, "I cannot ask the Wren again." "Oh, but you can," the father hissed. "After all, you saved her life, didn't you?" "She should be grateful," her mother bellowed. "Go now," they ordered. "And not only do we want a palace, but we wish to be rulers of all of the Ukraines," which is the country they live in. Luba walked slowly to the edge of the forest. Her heart was heavy. The sky was gray and dark. The forest looked bleak and unfriendly. Luba called for the Wren, and the Wren came. "What is it that they wish for now?" the Wren asked sternly. "Now they want to live in a palace and be rulers of all of the Ukraine," Luba answered, barely able to speak. "Go then, my child," the Wren said. "It is already done." Oh, wow. When Luba arrived home, she stood in the courtyard of a majestic palace. Everywhere she looked, there was uniformed servants and guard. When she entered the palace, there were her parents, surrounded by chancellors and vice-chancellors and noblemen from all of the countries and all the estates in the Ukraine. "I hope this makes them happy at last," Luba thought. And they were, for a time. But one morning, Luba awoke to find her parents standing near her bed. "We've been thinking," they said. "Being rulers of the Ukraine is not what we thought it would be. Go to the Wren and ask her to make us the Tsar and Tsarina of all of the Russia." "This I cannot do," Luba cried. "You must," they said. "After all, we are the rulers of the Ukraine, and you must obey us." When Luba got to the forest, the Wren was waiting for her. The sky was full of bellowing clouds, gray and storming. Lightning crackled at their edges. "Now, what do they want?" the Wren asked. "They want to be the Tsar and Tsarina of all the Russias," Luna answered as she cried. "Go then, it's already done," said the Wren. As Luba approached the clearing, she saw the onion domes of the Tsars gleaming in the sky. These are called onion domes. Then she saw her parents, the Tsar and Tsarina of all the Russias, drive up in a golden coach filled with riches and splendor that she could never have imagined in all of her life. Surely, she thought to herself, this will finally make them happy and content. This time it seemed that at long last they finally were. Then one day, Luba found them pacing the great hall. As Luba approached them, they said, "Ah, Luba, we've been thinking. Now that we are Tsar and Tsarina of all the Russias, we see absolutely no reason why we cannot be the Emperor and Empress of the world." Luba could not speak. "Go to the Wren and make this so. We command you," they growled. Luba hardly recognized her parents anymore, but she did as they asked. When she entered the forest that day, the sky was blacker than black. The trees twisted harshly. Storm clouds rolled angrily in the sky. The wind seemed to push against her every step. The Wren was waiting for her. "What now?" the Wren snapped. Luba did not speak for the longest time, but finally she said, "They wish to be the Emperor and Empress of the world." "Go then," the Wren said. "It is already done." Whoop, there they are. Luba stood in the majestic throne room. There, seated on the tallest thrones, were her parents, Emperor and Empress of all of the world. They didn't even speak to her. Leaders from all of the lands, from near and far, were bowing at their feet. At long last, Luba thought, they are happy and content. Then one day, as all the times before, she saw her parents standing, looking out one of the windows in her room. "We've been thinking," they said. "We want more, much, much more. We want to be as gods." Luba was stunned. "No, Papa. No, Mama. Do you hear what you're saying?" "Silence," they said. "Go to the Wren." Oh my goodness. Oh, there's little Luba. Luba went to the forest. Never had the journey taken so long. A fierce storm was brewing in the sky above her. The wind was howling. The trees were shaking. But the wren was waiting. Luba could not find the words to ask the wish. She just stood there and cried. "And now?" the wren asked almost sadly. They want to be gods," Luba choked through her tears. Lightning slashed the sky in half. Thunder cried out Luba's name. The ground pitched and buckled under her feet. "Go then, my child," the wren said. "It is already done." Luba walked sadly back to the clearing. Her steps were heavy. Her heart ached. But as she reached the clearing, she was astonished to see her old little house, that dear little house, just as it was in the beginning. The fences needed mending, the roof leaked, and the fields were meager and bare. Then she saw her Mama and Papa sitting on the front porch. Her mother was mending the torn clothes. Her father was carving a small piece of wood. "Here is our dearest treasure now," her mother exclaimed when she saw her. "I made this today just for you," her father said, as he showed her a carving of a small wooden bird. "Was it wonderful in the forest today?" they asked as they stretched out their arms to her. Luba leaped into their warm embrace. At long last, her parents were happy and very, very content indeed. The end. I love that book because you know what? They were greedy and they wanted more and 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 more. And they never could be happy with everything that they had. And then at the end, they found out that they were actually happy with what they started with. And their dear little Luba, their dear little daughter. The end. Thanks for listening to me today. Did you see my cats were listening too? Silly cats. All right, I'll see you soon. I miss you. Bye.